Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Metz. I'm with Code 4 Counseling, located in Denver, Colorado. And it is an absolute honor to have an opportunity to be here with you today to talk a little bit about leadership and a little bit about wellness. Now, we only have an hour, but what we're going to do today is talk about a program that we call LAWS. And LAWS stands for Leadership, Accountability, Wellness, and Service. Now, this 1 hour presentation is actually a very, very abbreviated and condensed version of this class. It's typically an 8 hour class. But what we're going to do today is pretty much just kind of hit the highlights of some things that you might want to be thinking about as a leader in your organization, and how you can really, truly make some really substantive changes and impacts within your organization. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and do share screen, and we have a PowerPoint. I promise not to kill you with PowerPoint, but I think it will be helpful to be able to have a little bit of context as to what we'll be talking about. So here we go. All right. So again, we're going to be talking today about leadership, accountability, wellness, and service. And what that really means in the long run is that when we talk about leadership and accountability and wellness and service, it really means from the standpoint of understanding that none of those can be mutually exclusive of the other. It's incredibly important that for one to work, all the other three have to be part of it. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. So, I'm going to welcome everybody here to December 1023, 2020. This has been a really strange few years. When you think about it, COVID started on March 1st, 2020. And since then, look at all the things that have happened and beyond. I mean, this is just a small list, but it has really made some significant impacts when it comes to what we look at and what we see as our role in law enforcement today, or just even as public safety professionals. It has made some significant changes, and it has really caused many responders to really ponder whether or not this is the job for them, especially within the law enforcement realm. Again, so much has gone on, right? COVID, George Floyd incident, the civil unrest that followed, all the political fallout from that, and a lot of other things. And it has really caused a lot of our law enforcement folks to really think twice about whether or not they want to continue in the profession, as well as people who aren't in the profession and who may have at one time thought, you know what, I think I would love a career as a police officer, and then starting to think, you know what, I don't know if I really want to go into something where I'm subjected to the kind of scrutiny and the kind of consequences that have really come about since then. Excuse me. So when we think about leadership, this is one of my favorite quotes from Colin Powell. This is a quote that, frankly, I've used for many, many years, and it's: leadership is about solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have stopped leading them. They either lost confidence that you can help, or concluded you simply don't care. In either case, it is a failure of leadership. And what that really means to me when I hear that is leadership is about stepping up and being out there. I'm going to guess all of you have heard a leader at one point say something to the effect of, I'm tired of all these questions. I'm tired of people not being able to make their own decisions. Why are they always coming to me? All those kinds of things. People are going to them because they are leaders. Now, does that mean that we excuse the folks who feel like they have to ask permission to tie their shoes? No. But people trust their leaders. And the day that you start to communicate to folks that you don't want to hear from them, you don't want to hear about their problems, personal or professional, you don't want them to bring questions to you, you don't want them outside your door, there'll come a point when all of a sudden there will be no one outside your door, because they will not have confidence or trust in either one, that you can handle the issue that is presented to you, or two, that, again, just like it says there in the quote, you simply don't care. And so leadership is about guidance. It is about being there and being present for your folks during those times when it can be when things are at their lowest as far as stress level, or when things are really spinning up. When you look at what law enforcement is facing today, I put this little graph together and you look at it, and it's amazing to me when we think about all the different types of groups or individuals who are constantly looking at our cops today. And it's pretty daunting. And I challenge you to think about other professions other than maybe, the president of the United States, or maybe some other higher political positions, but think about who out there really is watching our officers, our deputies, as much as what you see demonstrated here, right? Department leadership, obviously, the media, elected officials, plaintiff attorneys, work peers, special interest groups, and then the one on the top there, prosecutors. And when you think about what the last 2.5, 3 years has done with the relationship between police officers and prosecutors, it's changed a bit. Prosecutors are feeling the pressure of scrutinizing force issues much more. Many prosecutors around the country have filed force cases against police officers where before maybe they wouldn't have. So that relationship and that dynamic has also changed a bit. But again, when you think about the folks who you lead out there, keep this in mind of all the folks that are constantly watching them, because it's pretty daunting when you think about it. That big dude on the left is one of my best friends. His name is Alvin Little, Alvin Big Daddy Little. And Alvin, the reason he's wearing the chains is years ago when he and I were working together in Seattle, he was one of the rapping cops. He would go around to schools and rap with the kids. He was really good at what he did. But also a very serious tactician and a very serious leader. And one of the things that he used to teach all the time is practice for the day, for it will come. Now, the reason I think this slide is so important as we begin to move forward is that I oftentimes get questions from leaders and others about how do I best prepare for a catastrophe in my department or some kind of tragedy? What if I have a line of duty death? What if I have some kind of community tragedy? All these kind of things. How do I best prepare to how to handle those situations when they happen? And my response to that is your level of preparedness and that going through that process of preparing, it starts now. It starts with how you treat your folks day in and day out. How many of us know leaders that are either very antisocial, they don't want to talk to folks, they close themselves off, or they're very rude to subordinates and all those kinds of things. And then when something tragic occurs, all of a sudden now they're in folks' face saying, hey, if there's anything you need, I'm here for you. How many people do you think would really take them up on that offer? Because they've already shown their true colors before a tragedy happens. And so when we think about how best to take care of our cops following a line of duty death, some other kind of critical incident, establishing that trust now, establishing those relationships now, when things are fairly quiet and consistent, is definitely going to pay huge dividends when something happens. And it's not a matter of if. It's not a matter of if. We know that at some point, if you haven't already, you will face some significant crisis within your agency. Being prepared on the front end, just in how you work with your folks and the kind of person that your people know who you are, is the most important thing you can do for preparation at this time. So we talk about laws, right? Leadership, accountability, wellness, and service. The one thing that I want to make sure that you really understand when you hear this is the fact that neither one of these are exclusive to the other. In order to have good leadership, you have to have a service-minded philosophy. You have to hold people accountable, and you have to have a wellness philosophy. To have good wellness initiatives, again, you have to have service, leadership, and accountability to make wellness effective. Think of how many agencies out there claim to have a wellness philosophy, or maybe they have peer support, but the peer support really doesn't get used. And people are scared to use peer support because they're afraid it's going to get to management, and then that's going to be used against them, all those kind of things. And not to even say that would happen, but people may have that particular perception. So leadership, accountability, wellness, and service is about creating a philosophy of taking care of one another. So leadership in its simplest form is really taking the lead. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a sergeant all the way through a chief. Leadership is about taking care of the people to your left and to your right, to above you and below you. It doesn't matter what rank you are. You could be a one-year cop on the department. You can be a leader and start and begin showing people what leadership is about. Leadership is not necessarily about being the boss. Leadership sometimes is about doing what you're told. Sometimes leadership is about volunteering for certain types of assignments, all those kinds of things. Accountability in its truest form is being accountable to one another, being accountable to your agency, making sure you're doing things right the way that they need to be done. Let's jump up to service over here. When we talk about a service-minded philosophy, oftentimes our brains immediately go to the service that we provide the community. And that is absolutely important. Absolutely important. That is the bread and butter of what we do. But for the purposes of this class today, that service-minded philosophy is that service that we provide to one another. That service that we provide to that person on our left and to our right, the service we provide to the person above us and below us, being there for folks when it counts. Wellness in its truest form is everything there, right? If you have an agency where there's good leadership, there's good accountability, there's good service, even if you don't have a peer support team, even if you don't have a wellness coordinator, all those kinds of things, that there is the base and the foundation of really building wellness, because people will feel good about coming to work. And when people feel good about coming to work, when they trust their leaders, when they trust the processes, that is wellness in itself. So what I'd like for you to do over the next few minutes that we're together is I really want you to take a look inside yourself. Start asking yourself, and again, it doesn't matter what rank you are. You could be the sheriff, you could be a records clerk. It doesn't matter. But look inside yourself and ask yourself, what type of difference are you making in your agency, right? When you come in each day, are you coming in with the idea of, okay, this is what I got to do to get a paycheck? Or are you coming in each day to make a change, to make things better around you? Is that what you're doing? And then finally ask yourself, what is your legacy going to be? Sorry for the high pitch there. I'm going through puberty again. What is your legacy going to be, right? What do you want it to be? Oftentimes we hear people say, yeah, I'll do my 20 years and, once I'm out the door, everyone forgets me a week later. That's not really true. That is not really true. If you establish yourself as someone who people trust, people know that they can go to, can count on, someone who really comes in with a great attitude and really gets people around them motivated to do things, you will be remembered. You will be remembered. And that legacy will come up periodically in conversations for weeks, months, and even years to come after you leave. So you do leave a legacy. And I think that's an important thing to really keep in mind. I always ask this question of folks, what do you feel is the most important quality a leader can possess? And there's no wrong answer to this, no wrong answer at all. Some people will say trust. Some people will say experience. Some people will say honesty. Some people will say selfless. And every single one of those is absolutely correct. For me, the one that I believe is the most important quality of a leader, and it sounds very simplistic, but I believe it's true, is the most important quality of a leader to me is someone who actually likes people. Think about that, right? someone who actually likes to be around people, to lead people, to be there for folks, to help them with their problems, to help them solve puzzles, all those kinds of things that come up. That to me is the most important trait of a leader. But again, not to say that that's what's the most important for everybody else. This is another quote that I have used for many, many years. I used it when I was with the Seattle Police Department. I used it when I was with the Aurora Police Department. And that is, people may not remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Think about that just for a moment, right? They will always remember how you made them feel. Think about somebody in your life. It could be somebody that in which you had a very positive experience or maybe a very negative experience. And there could have been a situation that occurred, some kind of interaction, and you don't remember all the things that were said and all the things that were done, but you remember how you felt walking away from it. You either felt really good about that person and really good about that interaction, or you walked away with a very negative feeling. Excuse me. So it's really important as you move forward as a leader, keep this quote in your back pocket and ask yourself, what are people remembering about you? What are the things that they're remembering about you as a person, you as a leader? And how, again, when we think about our legacy, because this quote does impact our legacy, how you make them feel in the long run. So I'm going to guess there's some of you that never deal with organizational stress. And if you never deal with organizational stress, either you are asleep at the wheel or you're just incredibly lucky. I don't know. Organizational stress happens in every single organization. It just does. And there's nothing we can do to ever do away with organizational stress, no matter how much we try. There's always going to be something there that's going to create that stress. The question I want you to really be think about yourself is, how are you contributing to that organizational stress? Are you taking steps to try to reduce it a little bit for your folks, or are you spooling it up? And so those are some really important questions to really think about when we're talking about organizational stress, because again, it's always going to be there, but we play an amazingly important role in how that organizational stress is dealt with. I can tell you, as a leader in 2 different police agencies, did I cause my share of organizational stress? You bet I did. I absolutely did. Were there times that I created more organizational stress than was necessary? Yep. Did I sometimes create organizational stress because we had to do it? We had to implement new policies, new procedures, all those kinds of things that, people were like, oh my God, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? And, things were good the way they were, and now they're spooling this up. Sometimes we just have to do it. But when we think about organizational stress, it's also important to think about, what are we doing to minimize the negative impacts when pushing out a new process, pushing out a new procedure, pushing out a new policy? Communication. Are we communicating to folks the reason why we're doing this? Or are we just saying, hey, a new policy is coming out, we expect you to adhere to it, no questions, just move on, right? But if you're taking time to actually go sit down with people and explain to them, this is why we're implementing this new policy, they may not necessarily agree with it, they may not be happy about it, but at least they can say that, you know what, I appreciate this individual coming to our roll call, our lineups, whatever, and having a conversation with us about it. We still don't like it, but okay, but we have a much better sense and idea of why we're doing it, and we'll figure out a way to move through it. So as you look at this, start to think about what you can do in your own realm of responsibility to minimize organizational stress. When we think about today, going the wrong way here. When we think about today, there's a lot of agencies that are losing officers, especially, again, since what we talked about earlier, right? Officers are leaving because of, you know, the processes, the policies, all those kinds of things. And when you look at these circles, right, and you look at the size of these circles, right, one of the biggest reasons cops are leaving the profession today is because they don't feel like they have agency support. They don't feel like their chief or sheriff is really taking steps to have their back, you know, with the community, or especially those who may not necessarily be real fond of law enforcement. Then the next one down, the next one is lack of public support. Now, officers can typically deal with the lack of public support because, you know, that happens, right? You could have a critical incident that may have occurred, that people really question the decision making of the officers and all those kind of things. But when they have leadership in their organization that are there for them to let them know, hey, we still appreciate you, we got your back, all those kinds of things, that means the world. But those are the two biggest reasons today why people are leaving the profession. The smallest one is risk of injury or death. And when you think about it, you would think, well, that should be the biggest one, right? But no, when you think about the last, 50, 60 years, as they've been keeping records on the number of officers killed in the line of duty, it really hasn't slowed people from gravitating to this profession. They know the risk and they accept the risk because they believe in the profession. They believe in the concept of public service and the concept of being a peace officer. So again, when you think about that, that's a pretty telling argument right there about why people are or are not leaving the profession. Oops, excuse me. So when we look at this, right, when we think about the people who we work with or who work for us, one of the things that I hear a lot from line level cops, firefighters, you name it, is they don't feel seen. They feel like they're a cog in a wheel that is there to push forward some kind of initiative, that they're a tool for that initiative to be pushed forward. They're just another body in a car to handle calls. They don't feel like they're seen. They don't feel like people are taking the time to really getting to know them. They don't take time to get to know and want to learn about their families, their backgrounds, their personal lives, their interests, what they might want to do in the future in their profession. They just, again, feel like they're just this cog. And so it's really important as we think about leadership, ask yourself, do you believe the people who work around you, do they believe you see them? Do you see them as individuals versus as one cog in a cog of many, right? And so those are some important things to think about. Are you taking the time to ask people questions about their lives? Are you taking time to ask people about their backgrounds? Are you taking the time to ask people, what would you like to do in this career someday? And then, like on a question like that, what are you doing to help follow up with that then? Are you just hearing them and then they're going, oh, that's really nice? Or are you actually taking steps to help them and assist them in moving forward with some of those goals they may have? Why are you a leader? Now, I ask this question in my classes, and I don't ask for a response. I don't ask for a response, but I ask people to give some thought to why they are a leader. Why did they decide, or for that matter, a formal leader, right? Why did they decide to get the stripes? Why did they decide to get the bars? Why did they decide to get the stars, right? These are some important questions that must be asked and people must ponder. Did I become a leader because I felt that I could make a difference? Did I become a leader because I wanted to be there to assist other folks in my agency and in the community? Did I become a leader because I wanted the status and I wanted the authority? Did I become a leader because I wanted the extra pay? Now, when you think about those reasons behind why someone may have decided to become a leader, you may not vocalize those things, but here's the thing I want everyone to always remember. The people who are around you each day, they have a pretty strong perception as to why you did become a leader. They have a strong perception as to why they believe She became a leader because she really wanted to be a part of change and to be there for us, to assist us. Or he became a leader because he just wanted the authority, the stars, and the extra pay. They know. They know. One of the things as a leader, especially a formal leader, you set the tone. You set the tone each day. I love telling this story. When I was a chief in Aurora, I went to District 3 to visit roll calls. And District 3 is in a very nice area of Aurora. It's a fairly it's a busy district, but it's not like District 1 or District 2. I went to go visit a 3 o'clock roll call, and I remember walking in, and the sergeant was the only one in the roll call room at the time. And I walked in, and I said, "Hey, Sarge, I'm here. Just want to see how things are going." And he just sneers at me, and he says, "I'll tell you how things are going. I hate our district. Our commander sucks. The cars you got us suck. The new uniforms suck. And by the way, you suck." And I remember thinking to myself, man, okay, what did I do, right? And so a couple minutes later, the troops came in, and the troops started walking in, and they were all looking all, upset and just like they didn't want to be there, and they're sneering at me. And I'm like, "Hey guys, here to visit. Here's how things are going. What's going on?" And the troops were basically kind of the same thing, right? The district sucks, our commander sucks, our cars suck, you suck. And I remember walking out of there after that roll call just thinking, that was one of the worst roll calls I had ever been in my life. And I've been in some pretty intense roll calls in my career. That was by far the worst. And I remember being really angry and thinking, you know what, I'm just going to get out of here. But then I remember there was a 3:30, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do the 3:30. I'm just gonna head home. And then I thought, nope, everybody knows I was here, and if I don't show up, they're going to think I punked out, and I don't punk out. So I walk in to the 3:30. There's a different sergeant, and I see him, and he's like, "Chief, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah." And he's going on, and he's like, "Thanks so much for the new Tahoes. We love our district. The new commander's great," all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, what just happened in 30 minutes? Right. And then the troops come in, and the troops were much the same way. They were very, they were laughing, they were smiling, having a good time. We had a great dialogue about how things are going. They had complaints, but the complaints were, presented in a very respectful tone and respectful way. But when you think about those two, right? And I call that first roll call the Angry Birds. When you think about those two, the common denominator in both those groups was who? The sergeants, right? The sergeants set the tone. And it's unfair as leaders to set a tone that just brings everybody else around you down, brings everybody around to think, well, that's how I have to act too. Because now they're coming to work, they're miserable, they're probably not interacting with the community in a way that's positive. And so how we come in every day, do we always have to come in every day smiling, everything's great? No, there's going to be those days that we're not. But when you think about the majority of the time of how you present yourself, remember, it sets a clear tone. And when you think about how we set a tone, right? When you look at some of these examples that are here, right? And these are just a few. Right? Your employees trust you to do your job effectively. You are approachable and accessible. You treat others consistently with dignity and respect. You set clear and consistent attainable expectations. You have fun. This can be a fun job, but you have to be the one to make it fun, right? And so if those things are part of your philosophy and what you represent to your officers each and every day, wow, what a tone and what a message that sends, and what an example. And it's contagious. It is absolutely contagious. And when officers are feeling like they're supported and they're motivated and all those kind of things, they take that out onto the streets. That is when you see the positive interactions consistently between officers and the community. Open door policy. I love this phrase, right? I love this phrase. People, how many supervisors have you ever heard who say, I have an open door policy? And that's great. That's great. Sitting in your office with your door open, awesome. But I question two things. Number one, are people coming in, right? And if they're not taking advantage of your open door policy, why? Why? You need to ask yourself that. I had two chiefs that worked for me at SPD when I was in Seattle, and that worked for me. And they said both of them had open door policies. And one of them came to me and he says, I don't get it. He goes, the other one, he tells everybody he has an open door policy, and there's always cops coming up here, standing outside his door, wanting to talk to him and all this kind of stuff. I tell everybody I have an open door policy, and nobody ever comes up to visit. So I guess it's everyone else's fault because I tell them they can come up. And I asked him this second question. I said, it's great that you tell everybody that you have an open door policy, but are you getting up and going out the door? Are you getting up and going to the roll calls? Are you riding with your officers? Are you going to training with your officers? Are you backing your officers up on calls when you just happen to be in an area where you hear a call coming in? Do they get to see you in a different realm than what they're used to or what they assume that you represent? And that's an important thing. It's not just about people coming in to see you. You have to walk out the door to really truly have an open door policy. And when things happen and when all those kind of things, people need you to show up. When crisis occurs, they need you to show up. Remember how we talked earlier about the leader in your organization who every day most people are like they try to avoid them because they're just negative. They're always, they're intimidating, whatever the case may be. And then when something bad happens, right? Someone gets seriously injured, or God forbid someone dies or a family member dies, then they come to everybody and they say, hey, if you need anything, I'm here for you, right? And that's great. That's great that they showed up. But what happens a lot with those folks is that when things start to calm down, they stop showing up. To be an effective leader, you have to keep showing up, especially after some kind of tragedy, right? People need to know that you are consistent. You're not just there when the bad things happen. Because oftentimes what ends up happening is people could go through a tragedy, right? Let's say they lost a family member. That first week is the easiest. I know that sounds odd, but when you think about it, it really is. It's the easiest because there's so much support that's going on, right? Everybody's coming out of the woodwork to help out and to be there for that individual, right? But then after that first week, right? After the funeral, after everything is kind of wrapped up, everybody goes back to their lives because they've put their lives on hold for quite some time. So it's really important that we keep in mind that it doesn't just stop, right? That the worst part for families, especially after a death, is the weeks and months after, right? The worst part for officers who lose a colleague, whether to natural causes or was killed in the line of duty or whatever the case may be, is those weeks and months to come. Because now they're sitting by themselves. Now they are trying to put everything into perspective and into order, and it can be really difficult. So when you want to say that you're going to be there for them, yeah, you show up when it's a crisis, but even afterward, you gotta keep showing up. You gotta keep letting folks know you are there for them and that you will be there for them weeks and months after something happens. Control what you can control. This is important. As leaders, oftentimes we feel like, well, if we can't control certain things, or, I've got this boss and he's taking over all this stuff. Okay. That doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean you don't still be a leader. You just figure out, how do I control what I can control, right? Sometimes you hear people say, they're frustrated with the chief or sheriff. There's frustration about, how they work patrol, and they're frustrated with how the investigations unit is handling things. And they just kind of throw their hands up. It's like, no, I get the frustration. I get all that. but you still have a responsibility to control what you can control. Leading the people to your left and to your right, taking care of them, making sure that they're getting what they need. The other thing, and we talked a little bit about this earlier when we talked about the see me, right? Remember we had that crowd of people there, and the one person saying, "Do you see me?" Right? This is really important when you have folks working for you, is to really take an active interest in them. Be curious about who they are. Ask questions about their education. Ask where they went to school. Ask questions about their family. Now, there's going to be some people who may not be real comfortable with that, and you have to just kind of gauge it. But for a lot of folks, they like knowing that their leaders actually take an active interest in their lives, that they care about who they really are as people, not just as somebody who fills a car and handles calls. So taking that time to do that is important. And the second part of that is let them see you be a little bit vulnerable at times. And what I mean by that is this. All of us at one point or another have had struggles in our lives. We have. Whether those struggles have been personal or professional, we have struggled with some things. It could be substance related, it could be work related, it can be relationship related. And to be able to have an opportunity to let people know that you have struggled as well is a powerful tool to helping folks get up the courage to ask for help. And here's what I mean by that. We know that in our profession, to step up and say, I'm struggling, to step up and saying, I have an alcohol issue, to step up and say, I'm not sure I want to live anymore. That's a scary and daunting thing to tell your leaders. It is, because you're worried that it's going to impact your reputation. Are they going to take your gun and badge away? All these kinds of things. But when you are able to actually put some of your stuff out there, right? When you're actually able to say, you know, at one time I struggled with alcohol. You know, at one time I went through a serious relationship issue with, you know, and had to go through a divorce and all this kind of stuff. And it really hurt. And it was a struggle for a while. When they can see their leaders, and again, when I say leaders, I'm not just talking about those with formal rank. These are the leaders in your department, the day-to-day, that say, when people look at them and say, I respect that individual, that person I know can be counted on. And now they're telling me they've had their struggles as well. And when you do that, you are giving folks permission, informal permission, but you're giving them permission to come forward and say, I too am struggling. And these are the things I'm going through. We don't want our people to be suffering in silence. We see too much right now of officers, you know, officer suicide or just suicide in general, you know, where people are not feeling like they can reach out to others. People need to know that you can be there for them. And by being vulnerable and letting them know you've struggled, you are also telling them you're there for them. One of the things that's really important is owning our mistakes, right? Being willing to apologize. We all make mistakes. We all have made this, you know, whether it's been a decision that maybe didn't work right, maybe we were having a bad day and we lost our temper with somebody and we kind of snapped, or whatever the case may be. But being willing to come forward and letting folks know, hey, you know what? That was not my best day. That was not my best interaction. And I take responsibility for that. And I am sorry. And this really is amazing for those who do have higher rank, right? Because oftentimes people with higher rank are reluctant to come forward and say, I could have done better. They just are. And so when you take responsibility and you put your stuff out there and say, yeah, I messed this one up, I'm sorry, that resonates with the people who look up to you, because they see that you recognize your own faults, you recognize your own mistakes, you can take responsibility for it, and it's not beneath you to give an apology. Empathy is another area, right? Making sure that people know that we actually care and we can empathize with some of the things that they may be experiencing. For them to see that when they are struggling, or even when they make a mistake, right, that we can we can get on their case about the mistake, but we're also empathetic with the fact that they might be embarrassed about it. They might feel like they've let you down. And so being part of that and providing that kind of an important message goes a long, long way. And I love this quote from Brene Brown. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. As leaders, I always tell, or as when I talk to different leaders, I always encourage them to really ask themselves a number of questions. And we did this a little bit earlier, but I take this one a little bit more further. But to ask questions like, how do I want my family to see me? What as a leader do I aspire to become? How do I want my employees and their families to see me? And how do I want my bosses to see me? Now, these sound really simplistic, but I bring your attention to the how do I want my employees to see me and how do I want my bosses to see me? If your employees see you different than how your bosses see you, there may be a problem. That may be a sign that you're playing up to two different entities and you're not really presenting yourself. It should be pretty consistent between the two of who you are, what your priorities are, what your philosophy is, all those kinds of things. And so I ask you to ask yourselves those questions and to really think about what your answers are to those. Gossip. Now, I'm going to guess none of you come from any organization that gossip is an issue, right? Right. In the law enforcement field, especially, gossip is like the gasoline that keeps the motor running, right? But gossip can be so toxic and it can really break down. It can break down an organization. It can break down a team. It can break down individuals. We all know people who have been subject of rumors that are not true or are only filled with half truths. And we've seen people, I have seen, and I'm going to guess many of you have seen people who have really struggled and suffered over rumors and gossip to the point where they either have left the profession altogether or just, isolate themselves from others in the organization. Again, because rumors can be and gossip can be so toxic. So this is really important here that as leaders, and I'm going to guess most of you here have at one point or another participated in some kind of gossip or rumor. I have. We all have. But I also want us to be a little bit more cognizant of what the impacts are. And when we think about the example that we want to set for our folks, what are we doing? Are we readily engaging in that gossip? Or are we telling people who are telling the gossip to knock it off? Are we telling people who come to us with gossip to say things like, so are you okay with me going back to so-and-so and telling them that you told me A, B, and C? When people know that you are not fond of gossip and that you don't want to hear it, they won't bring it to you. They won't bring it to you. But it's also important to not only model it, but set expectations for your folks about the consequences of gossip and how you will hold them accountable for that. And here's the other thing, and especially if you are someone who likes to engage in rumors and gossip within your agency, my guess is you have been the subject of rumors and gossip. And so keep in mind, if you've heard it, I'm going to guess it hurt at times, but imagine some of the stuff that may have been said that if you did hear it, how that would make you feel. So credible leadership creates a culture of wellness. We talked about that already, right? When we think about how we handle tragedy and how we handle crisis within our organization, what we do on the front end, what we do on those days that are quote unquote normal, is really important because again, that tees up our credibility, that tees up our ability to be effective leaders during times of crisis. This is a quote, another quote that I use a lot. This actually comes from me. And the quote is, there is no such thing as an uninjured law enforcement professional. And that includes our civilian partners, right? We know that in the uniformed realm, we know how easy it is to get physically hurt. But the reality is, you're likely not going to get out of this profession without some kind of physical injury, right? That's likely to happen. If all it is a hangnail, okay, good for you. But you're likely not going to get out of it without some kind of physical injury. But you're also not likely to get out of this profession without some kind of stress injury, whether it's from the things that we've seen out on the streets, our interactions with the interactions with our peers and our supervisors, all those kinds of things. So as police officers, as public safety professionals, we carry a lot of that baggage with us all the time. And that baggage, if left unchecked, could really become an issue down the road. And we're going to get into that here in just a moment. So when we think about our support systems, families are probably the number one support system for most of us. And one of the things that we really need to keep in mind when we think about our families is, how connected are they to the agency? Do they really understand the agency? Do they know the people within our agency? Do they have trusting relationships with people in our agencies in the event something were to happen to you? So as kind of that list shows there, right? Oftentimes families feel isolated from the agency. They don't know what to expect if the worst case scenario occurs. They don't understand processes, all those kind of things. Many families don't know other cop families, right? But there's things that we can do about that. There's things that we can do to kind of help our families feel a little bit more support. Part of that is getting them together with other police families, whether that's organized events, whether it's things like a family academy where we bring families together and they learn about the department, they get a chance to participate in some of the fun training, such as the firearms training simulator, or they get to drive around the track fast, all those kinds of things. Those kinds of things can be important, but also knowing that what kind of resources are available to them in the event they have a crisis, right? Do they have therapists available to them? If they need emergency childcare because something happened to their loved one, who might be available? All those kinds of things. Sending commendations to family. This is one I really love. I had a lieutenant that worked for me in Aurora that never wrote commendations to his cops. Never did. He wrote the commendations to their families. He took the time to get to know their families, to meet their families. And when one of his officers would do something, really, really well and really put themselves out there, he would send the commendation to the family to say, hey, I want you to know about your husband, your wife, your child, your mom or dad, whatever the case may be. And he would send that to them and personalize about how proud he was to have someone like that working for them. And you know how cops can be, right? And public safety professionals, like, I don't care if I get a commendation, but you should have seen these guys when they got home, when they told us about coming home and their family saying, look at this letter we just got from your boss. Meant the world to them. Having different events several times a year for the families, picnics, date nights, family movie nights, creating a social media page. All those kinds of things are about establishing a greater degree of connection. One of the things that we find oftentimes, and we hear this a lot, are our cops are struggling, right? And sometimes we really don't know how to have those conversations. And sometimes our cops who are struggling, they don't really know how to even articulate what they might be feeling, right? And so this is a responder stress continuum. The original continuum was actually created by the United States Marine Corps and Navy for their enlisted folks. And you can see here the green, yellow, orange, and red. And green basically being, hey, life is pretty good. I'm bebopping around, no issues. And then you go up the continuum and you go to the red, where there's some real issues going on here that we need to address right away. And so sometimes what supervisors have done who have this continuum is they will take, if they're worried about somebody, they'll call them in, they'll sit them down privately, and they'll put that continuum right in front of them, and they'll say, check off the things that you believe apply to you. And they may check off some things that are in the green, in the yellow, even in the red, right? They might feel physically healthy, but they're feeling really depressed, and they're having thoughts of suicide, anxiety, all those kinds of things. This gives that sergeant or supervisor or leader, a pretty good idea of where that person is, and to help them get the kind of resource they need, particularly if they need it right away, right? If somebody's in the red, even then that's something that we want to make sure that we're addressing as quickly as possible. If that continuum doesn't work, try this one. This is one of my favorite ones, and I'm guessing most of you can kind of relate to this. That's kind of the average cop, right? The I'm half full, that's usually the recruit who just graduated from the academy. Then about 2 weeks later, when they realize, I'm not sure about this job, that's when they become half empty. And then after about a month in the job and beyond, this is kind of what their thought processes are. We often hear, especially today, that we see a lot of things about, especially in social media, about how this job will kill us emotionally, right? We hear about the suicide rate amongst public safety professionals and all those kinds of things. And I'm going to buck against that just a little bit. I do not believe necessarily that this job will kill you from that standpoint. What I believe is that oftentimes we have folks who come into this profession who already have existing baggage, right? There may have been traumas in their childhood or issues in their young adulthood that they never resolved. So basically, the balloon is like this when they come on, right? And it's easier to handle because they got this new academy, a new job, and they're just maybe a new family, and they're able to just kind of deal with things. But that balloon is still sitting in the back of their head, and they never got counseling for whatever the issues were. They've never addressed it, and that balloon is there. And then guess what? Now they graduate from the academy and they're on the streets, and they're dealing with what? Shootings. They're dealing with assaults. They're dealing with being called names. They're dealing with being assaulted, all these kind of things. And what happens is that balloon that was already here now starts to expand even more. And then we see where it can pop. And this is where I think it's incredibly important that when we are hiring people on that front end, when they're getting ready to go to the academy, is really encouraging them to get into a therapist and to start working through any issues that they may be dealing with from the past. And they're going to probably tell you they don't have issues, and that's fine. And just tell them it's simply a wellness check. But having them being able to sit down and getting some of those issues resolved, because if that balloon is already here on the first day of that academy, and now they're able to go to a therapist while they're in the academy and start working on issues, or at least shortly after they're out of the academy, hopefully they can get that balloon to start shrinking a little bit, because when they deal with other stress, and they will, that balloon isn't as sensitive and as delicate to the potential of popping. I hope that made sense, but I really encourage folks to get that help on the front end. These are things that we really need to watch for in our folks. And again, being a good leader, getting to know your folks, asking them questions about their background, asking them questions about their family, taking that active role, all those kinds of things, you're going to know their baseline, right? You're going to have a pretty good idea of how they are every day, right? And if this person comes in every single day, they're bebopping, they're happy, they're excited to get on the street, and all of a sudden, one day they come in and they're really down, and that's not abnormal. But it's abnormal when that one day turns into 2, 3, 4, 10, 40, right? And they're coming in and they're very different. They're isolating themselves from others. They look tired, like they're not sleeping, all these kinds of things. These are the things that we need to be looking for all the time. All the time. Yes, we have to be responsible for all the administrative things and attendance and reports and all these kind of things, but we need to be watching these kinds of signs, right? Is somebody all of a sudden working a lot of overtime, a lot of off duty? And if they are, maybe they're just trying to buy a car, or they're in deep financial distress. And so those are issues that we want to make sure that we're addressing and being able to have conversations and not being afraid to confront it. To say to somebody, I know that you've been working a lot of overtime lately. I know that you've been working a lot of off-duty jobs. You're coming in looking sleepy. Let's have a conversation. Let's figure out what's going on, and let's see if we can get you some kind of assistance. Now, there's the likelihood when you have that conversation, or maybe someone proactively comes to you and tells you, you know what, I'm struggling. I am really struggling. I'm going through a really nasty divorce. I'm financially in the tank. Whatever the case may be, maybe they'll even tell you they're suicidal. Most times not, but oftentimes they're going to come to you and say they're struggling, or somehow it comes out in the conversation. It's important to not panic. It's important to not feel like, oh my God, what do I do? This person just told me that they might be suicidal. The fact that they came to you and opened up to you about that, it says so much about you. It says that you have created an atmosphere where people can trust you. And don't stop the conversation. Don't stop the conversation. Sometimes people say like, oh, time out. Let me go find someone. Let me go get a therapist, whatever. No. Keep that conversation going, and don't stop that conversation, because if they're talking, they're still with you, right? Keep that going. And just kind of follow some of these rules, these not rules, but these steps here to just think about how you can help them. If you've got somebody who's really struggling, they're exhausted, they're really emotional, ask them if they're suicidal. A lot of times people will say, oh, I'm afraid if I ask them if they're suicidal, I'm giving them that idea. No, you're not. If they're struggling, it's likely to have crossed their mind. Does it mean they're going to do it? No. But, oftentimes it's not uncommon to hear someone say something like, you know what, no, I'm not necessarily suicidal from the standpoint that I'm going to go out and hurt myself, but damn, if a big ass rock, fell on me today, I'd be okay with it. Yeah, but that's still troubling, right? So being able to have those conversations and to address those issues head on are really important. And again, if they come to you to tell you they're struggling, if they come and tell you they're actually suicidal, take that as a compliment. I know that sounds really weird, but take it as a compliment, because they trust the fact that they know you're going to handle it the right way. Ask about their sleep. I know this sounds really simplistic, but most times when people are dealing with difficult issues, financial issues, work issues, family issues, whatever the case may be, there's a 99+% chance that they're not getting good sleep. There just isn't. And when we don't get that good sleep, we get up cranky, we're not as alert, and unfortunately our outlook on life isn't as good either, right? And so whatever it is we're dealing with, and if we're not sleeping, either we can't fall asleep or we can't stay asleep. The reality is that is going to just build that balloon of issues that they're dealing with at the time. So helping them understand about sleep and the importance of sleep, maybe referring them to a doctor or a therapist to say, okay, let's figure out how we can get you on a decent sleep schedule. Because when you can start getting some decent sleep, you can start seeing that, okay, there's a chance to solve this puzzle. I can see the opportunity to do this. I'm in a better place to have, tough conversations, whatever the case may be. But it's also an easy topic to bring up, right? You might be nervous about, I don't know how to bring up some of this other stuff. Everybody has dealt with sleep issues. Everybody. And especially in our profession, right? And so when you can ask someone how they're sleeping, you're not asking something that's so out there that these people aren't, and they're not going to be willing to talk about it, because we've all suffered from it. We're not going to be able to solve everybody's problems as leaders. We're just not. But sometimes that just means being able to sit in the suck with them, letting them know that I can't do anything about your problem. I'm really sorry you lost your mother, your father, your wife, whatever the case may be. But you know what? I'm going to be here for you, and I'm going to sit here with you. And maybe I'm not going to talk much, and I'm not going to have all these ideas to solve the problems. But know that I'm there with you, checking on them, texting them every now and then. How you doing? All those kinds of things. Because remember the Maya Angelou quote, right? People may not remember what you said or what you did, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel. And don't forget to take care of your leaders. We often think about, again, we talked about taking care of the people to our left and to our right and below us, right? But also think about the leaders above you. Oftentimes they are the least likely to reach out when they're dealing with stuff. But you know, and I'm going to guess you've worked around a lot of these folks for a long time, that you can tell when they're out of sorts. You can tell when they might be struggling. And taking that time to ask how they're doing, taking that time to say, "Hey, where's your head at? I've noticed you've been really down. You've been more irritable than normal." All those kinds of things. And maybe there's nothing you can do for them. But again, it goes back to sitting in the suck. When they know that you have noticed and they know that you care, it goes a long, long ways. And finally, be the leader you wish you had. Think about that leader that you would love to have. And if that leader has certain traits and qualities that you really admire, then work on those of getting those traits for yourself and those qualities for yourself. It's been an absolute joy to have the time to spend with you today. Oh, and one more, and be intentional and look for the good, right? Oftentimes in our role, we see the bad. We see it's easy to look at everything being really negative, but take the time to look for the good. There's a lot of good out there, and the good really does outnumber the bad. But we have to be intentional, right? What we said before, we have to be intentional and we have to look for it. Okay, with that, I just want to say thank you for taking the opportunity to spend time watching this video. I'm hoping that the information that you received was helpful for you. And I also want to invite you, if at any point you have any questions, my contact information was listed there. Feel free to reach out at any time. And if you would like to bring this class to your agency, let us know. Again, this is an 8-hour day, but there's a lot of opportunities for interchange and idea sharing and things like that. It can be a very powerful, powerful time. I wish the best for all of you during this holiday season. Hold your loved ones tight. Take good care of yourself. And if there's anything that we can do at Code 4 to assist you, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, I'm Nick Metz. We love you, and safe travels for everyone.